it all seems so innocuous as you go through it, okay? That's the reason why this is so scary, and it's so important for you to be informed and to be aware of what's happening, because each step seems like no big deal. I'm sure everyone is aware that there has been a huge amount of anti-trans legislation going on. I wanted to kind of discuss the general vibe, like the vibes. We want to discuss the vibes of what's going on in this country and the types of rhetoric that are being employed against trans people and queer people, to be completely honest. More importantly, I wanted to focus up on the anti-trans part of this because obviously that's the more targeted demo right now, right? By definition, we are in progress toward genocide against trans people. And people always think like, that's a big, wow. You can't use that word. Like that's a, whoa now, okay? Okay? First of all, because it is a loaded term, there are, certain technicalities that make people think, oh, this cannot apply, right? The UN's definition, really just leaves out queer and trans people from it. Like, let's not be surprised that the official definition of genocide doesn't currently have any explicit protections about gay and trans people, even though keeping in mind that the pink triangle symbol for gay people originated because that was the symbol that they would put on us in Nazi Germany. People who were arrested for being gay and trans were often jailed after being freed from the Nazi camps because it was still illegal to be gay and trans. These are groups that have historically not received reparations, didn't even really receive acknowledgements until fairly recently, specifically transgender or like transvestite, cross-dressing, whatever. People who are gay plus, essentially, politically speaking, is kind of how this has been treated before. Like, so the gay people started getting noticed in these acknowledgements, but trans people still don't get their own separate acknowledgements. Keep that in mind when someone comes at you and is like, this technically isn't genocide, because the UN defines genocide as the attempt to specifically exterminate groups based on certain characteristics. And I do want to pull that up really fast. Let's get a switchy switch. Right here, we're looking at some UN genocide prevention fact sheet stuff. That's the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, 1948. And right down here, it says, according to the convention, genocide is a crime that can take place both in time of war as well as in time of peace. The definition contained in Article 2 of the convention describes genocide as a crime committed with the intent. So intent is technically part of it. The intent to destroy a national, ethnic, racial or religious group in whole or in part. It does not include political groups or so-called cultural genocide. So it's one of those fuzzy things here where like you could technically say, someone could argue it's not genocide because gay people or LGBT people have a political ideology. They have an agenda. As opposed to national, ethnic, racial, or religious, which are technically considered like intrinsic traits, even though religion is not an intrinsic, whatever. But this is to say that it does not, like technically, I guess you cannot commit genocide against like communists. Technical definitions aside, we're going to now look at the 10 stages of genocide. This is an infographic from the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. We're going to kind of look at all of the steps and take a moment to sort of reflect on the ways in which we can see these things happening in the current time. By the way, if you haven't clicked like on the video, please click like on the video, babes. Please click like on the video, babes. Oh my God, I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and switch this around and pull this up. We are going to now look at this infographic, like I said, from the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, the 10 stages of genocide. The 10 stages of genocide. Stage 1, classification. The differences between people are not respected. There is a division of us and them, which can be carried out using stereotypes or excluding people who are perceived to be different. Very low-level stuff here, the stuff that doesn't seem crazy harmful, right? Stage 2, symbolization. This is a visual manifestation of hatred. Jews in Nazi-occupied Europe were forced to wear the Yellow Star of David. In Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge forced people from the eastern zone to wear blue scarves. It shows you these little infographics of here's a Star of David, here's that scarf. From 1992, in northwest Bosnia, all non-Serbian citizens were forced to wear white armbands. So this is, just like the people are being specifically marked in some way. Like they're being made to be visible in this way, which you could technically, you could like technically say that systematically denying people access to hormones and transition is a means of making sure that they remain visible. Stage 3, discrimination. The dominant group denies civil rights or even citizenship to identified groups. The 1935 Nuremberg laws stripped Jews of their German citizenship, made it illegal for them to do many jobs or to marry German non-Jews. Discrimination can take many forms. This is, just denying civil rights broadly. It gives you one specific example, but this can happen in a number of different ways. Obviously, being denied housing at a systemic level and not having that addressed, being underemployed at a systemic level and not having those economic inequalities addressed. Stage 4, we have dehumanization. Those perceived as, quote, different are treated with no form of human rights or personal dignity. During the genocide in Rwanda, for example, Tutsis were referred to as cockroaches. The Nazis referred to Jews as vermin. So we are currently seeing this big time. We are at minimum stage 4 here, on account of trans people being called it and trans people being called groomers and pedophiles. That is just, I think it's pretty emphatically clear that that's sort of just where we're at right now. Yeah. So then moving on to the next step, we have organization. Genocides are always planned. Regimes of hatred often train those who go on to carry out the destruction of a people. This is kind of what we were talking about earlier about stochastic terrorism. And just to refresh, stochastic terrorism is when you cannot directly make it so that it's the death penalty for a trans person to be trans, but you can feed the media a bunch of lies about trans people and how scary they are in order to incentivize people to be violent toward us. So that's what stochastic terrorism is. It's drumming up hatred in the hopes that other folks will take over the genociding for you to an extent. So the Sudanese government supports and arms the Janjaweed or Arab militia in Darfur to carry out violence and killings in Sudan. Hello, it is I from the more recent past. Since the time that we originally streamed this and now when I'm editing it, there has been an update on number 5. Originally I said I don't know exactly that there is an amount of organization happening with militia groups or anything because I would have to know what's happening internally within the Proud Boys. So there's been an update about that situation. Turns out that I believe in Idaho, there was a group of men loaded up into the back of a U-Haul on their way to a pride event, seemingly with body armor and seemingly with intent to start a riot or some other kind of disruption. They were members of Patriot Front, which is a white supremacist group, and perhaps you could even say a militia group. So, yeah, there are organized groups of men with body armor who have decided that it's time to come show up at the queer place and have words with us or something along those lines. Back to your regularly scheduled programming. Stage 6, polarization. Propaganda begins to be spread by hate groups. The Nazis used the newspaper Der Stürmer to spread and incite messages of hate about Jewish people. This is definitely happening. You've got the Daily Wire movie that just came out called, What is a Woman? Politicians out here calling us trans terrorists.
I think some of the most dangerous people in America are trans terrorists.
And saying oh, if someone was weird toward my family in a bathroom, then I would kill that person. But you're really just only one step away from saying we should basically just be violent toward trans people if we clock them in general in public, but especially in the locker room. That's Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way, everybody.
If I was a parent and my 5th grade daughter had to sleep and shower in some kind of cabin at some summer camp that I paid money to send my child to, and there was a man calling himself a woman sleeping in her cabin, showering with her, that guy he'd be in jail. He would be in jail. Well, first off, my husband would have beat him into the ground, and then he'd be in jail. But this is exactly how we need to stand up against this stuff.
It all seems innocuous. It all seems so innocuous as you go through it, okay? That's the reason why this is so scary, and it's so important for you to be informed and to be aware of what's happening, because each step seems like no big deal. Keeping in mind that in Nazi Germany, they burned all of the books in the Hirschfeld Library, the Sexual Institute of Study, and I'm sure that there were plenty of people who were like, oh, it was just a book burning, you know? They didn't kill anybody. They didn't hurt anybody. They just burned all of the books that had anything to do with studying this one particular hated minority demographic, okay? Each individual step doesn't seem like a big deal, but you need to be alert and aware of the pattern, okay? So again, differences between people are not respected. There's a division of us versus them. Stereotyping, like the way that Steven Crowder dresses up like a trans woman on his show and like goes into Planet Fitness and pretends to be a ditzy trans woman. Like, it starts there. Visual, like making sure that they're visually different, denying trans kids the opportunity to transition so that they continue to look trans. Discrimination in all kinds of different situations. Dehumanization, referring to people in terms that strip them of their humanity. Like, keep in mind, like, the reason why terms and slurs like the T slur, you know, like if someone calls a trans person a, then that word being used in that way it's a noun that replaces other human nouns, that says, like, fundamentally you are not the same as me. And that's why that type of language, otherizing language, alienating language, is considered dehumanizing and dangerous, okay? Keep that in mind. Stage 5, organization. Again, I would say that this is being perpetrated via stochastic terrorism, okay? Polarization, we just talked about. So this is kind of now moving into, we're in the next 4 steps and we need to be alert for this kind of thing, okay? So preparation. Perpetrators plan the genocide. They often use euphemisms, such as the Nazi phrase, the final solution, to cloak their intentions. Acts of genocide are disguised as self-defense if there is an ongoing armed conflict or civil war, such as in Bosnia. The kind of stuff that's being used in the polarization section over here is also being used as part of this preparation, I would say. Acts of genocide are disguised as self-defense. All of these things that are happening about trans people in the United States are kind of predicated on the idea that trans people are a threat to children, is the main thing.
All students are welcome to utilize gender reassignment services today in the gym. This is confidential. Your parents will not be notified.
I'm Garrett Soldano, and I don't co-parent with the government. My pronouns, conservative, patriot. The woke groomer mafia wants to indoctrinate and subjugate our kids to their warped fantasies. It's time to fight back. As governor, I'll turn Michigan into the parents' rights capital of America and transition Walt Whitmer out of office.
They always bring up drag queen story hours. They're always like, oh my God, this public library brought all of these drag queens in and they're being weird around you know, like, okay, so they're propping up all of the things that they're doing against us as a type of self-defense. Or like, these transgenders are coming in and trying to take over women's sports. It's classic role reversal. Keep that shit in mind. This is DARVO. If anybody's not familiar with DARVO, it is a term to describe a manipulative behavior that is typically done in abusive situations, abusive relationships. That DARVO stands for deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Like, technically it's 3 steps. So deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. So if you were to say, like, you are making laws that are preventing people from being able to, you know, go to the bathroom, enact their rights the way that they're supposed to be able to, you know, they will turn around and say, like, no, we're not doing that. And even if I was doing that, it would be because you are a danger to children, you know? Like, they're like reversing who is even the one who's starting the problem. I just ran into this issue on Twitter where someone was like, I was like, listen, it's not like we create these laws protecting bathroom rights, like, just because. Like, we've been using the bathroom in the United States as trans people for decades, and it has not been a problem until laws are passed to restrict that, or some action is taken by the government to restrict that. And this person I was arguing with, like, insisted, like, no, you started it with Grimm v. Virginia. And that's like a lawsuit that started in 2016. And I was like, first of all, the law in North Carolina limiting bathroom access passed in March of 2016. Second of all, what was the Grimm versus Virginia case about? Oh, it was the government schools saying you can't use the bathroom in the way that you're intending to as a trans person, you know, and then he had to sue in retaliation, right? Like that, like it was still that the government started it. And that's like something that people just fundamentally seem to not understand. The government is actually the one starting the bullshit, right? Like it's not like they're doing something to protect anyone. All of these states where laws are passing to restrict like participation in sports, for example, are states in which there is only one transgender student like enrolled in sports in the whole state. Keeping that in mind, like all that to say that what we're looking at here is acts of genocide disguised as self-defense. Like, oh, you trans people are the ones causing the problems. You know, you are the ones, whatever. We often use euphemisms. Hello again from Editing Lux. I didn't really know where this one fit in, so I'm just here to let you know that I have now seen video evidence of a political candidate explicitly calling for the execution of queer and trans people. It's not a euphemism, so it didn't really fit into the euphemism part. I'm not really sure where this is going to end up in the video, but here is the clip of this person saying this thing.
The LGBT, transgender, grooming our children's minds is a national security threat because it is ultimately designed to destabilize the republic we call the United States of America. That's why when I'm elected, I don't want to just vote. I want to start holding people accountable for treason to the Constitution. I am going to push to reenact HUAC. HUAC is the House of Un-American Activities Committee. It was a real committee that was formulated back in the 50s, and it's a committee that we should reenact that starts holding these people accountable for treason. We need to hold people for treason, start having some public hearings, and start executing people who are found guilty for their treasonous acts against the Constitution of the United States of America, just like they did back in 1776.
You know what, South Carolina? This is our guy.
Things have just gotten a little bit real. Victims are identified because of their ethnicity or religion, and death lists are drawn up. People are sometimes segregated into ghettos, deported or starved, and property is often expropriated. Genocidal massacres begin. This, I think we're not quite to this point. However, I would say that we're getting rather close to it. And the reason why I would say that is because we have the law in Texas that recently passed about like, oh, letting your kid do hormones is child abuse, like under currently existing law. So we don't even have to make a new law that says it's child abuse. Like victims are being identified. So I would say we're not quite at this point. This is probably like, this is like basically the next step though. And it's different in different parts of the country. You know, not every state has laws that are falling under these previous steps, you know. It's kind of a slow rollout. It's kind of like when Facebook has like an update to their whole website, but only certain people get access to it at a time. Yeah, and Loopy points out it's worth noting that these steps can be independent of each other and happen simultaneously. It's just this is kind of designed in a way to describe like an escalation of severity of behavior. So because we have persecution, and then the next step is extermination. And extermination is the hate group murders their identified victims in a deliberate and systematic campaign of violence. Millions of lives have been destroyed or changed beyond recognition through genocide. So this is, you know, persecution is like people are fucking in camps and deported and starved, and property is removed from their possession, like their homes are repossessed or their cars are taken away. So once you get to extermination, stage 9, they're not just in the camps. They're now being gassed, you know, like they're not just in labor camps. They're being actively killed at this point. And like, you know, obviously at this point, people have like become political refugees and stuff, like very serious time. And then we have denial. Stage 10, the perpetrators or later generations deny the existence of any crime. Evidence is destroyed and witnesses are intimidated. There has been an increase in Holocaust denial online in recent years. Like, I will say the one good thing about Germany post World War II is that they buckled down a bit and they were like, no, like this was serious. We have Holocaust memorials everywhere. We don't want this to be a repeat for Germany. So, you know, they didn't do so much of the denial stuff back in the day. or at least like in the couple decades after, you know, like it's been kind of more recent that there have been increased denial of the Holocaust having happened, like this conspiracy theory type shit going on. But yeah, I just wanted to make it totally clear to everyone that this is very much like, okay, keeping in mind, we have gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I feel that it's been pretty demonstrably clear. And then stage 8 is the one where they start actively killing people. Like, to be completely clear, according to the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, 10 stages of genocide, the United States of America is one step away from killing people. Like, outright. We're talking like George Takei in labor camps shit on US soil. One last thing. Genocide never just happens. There is always a set of circumstances which occur or which are created to build the climate in which genocide can take place. These stages may occur simultaneously or in a different order. Based on research by Dr. Gregory H. Stanton on the genocidewatch.com website. So, just, again, I don't mean to be doomer or anything, but I want you to be able to move with knowledge. Like, I don't think people understand what this all means, but it's not fucking cute. And it does mean that you might need to have an exit plan. You know, you might need to be prepared to get to somewhere more liberal if you live somewhere very conservative. You might want to have some cash on hand in case your assets get frozen. It sounds like, oh, it couldn't possibly happen, but it always feels like that until it happens. I don't think anyone who has been subjected to a genocide has been like, oh yeah, you know, like, this is definitely like headed this way. Like, you know, people get pulled out of their homes because they still felt safe in their homes to some extent. So that's all. Be prepared. Be aware. Move with caution. This video was brought to you by my patrons, all my donators really, but today I want to especially shout out Mersh Rolvog, Maurice Taylor, Tiago Nascimento, Jovian F. Gaudreau, Bean, Shenanigans, Amanda B., Heather Clarkson, R. Halverson, Decoy Duck, Sarah A., Wellington Marcus, Michelle Winter, Athiette, Nova, Frozen Summers, Suzanne Maynard, Elizabeth Bartell, and Mr. Atheist.